Well, first of all, I want to talk about where the medicines and all the information came from. And I always like to acknowledge our ancestors because they remembered so much and kept the medicines going. So, how I learned about the medicines from the beginning was from my grandma Mary. She knew a lot about the medicines. She would treat us when we were young with the medicines. If we had a cold, she'd use turpentine and lard on our necks. A earache, she'd blow smoke in our ear. Just, little things here and there that we didn't really notice. But later, when I think back on it, I just think that's just so priceless that she did that for us. She also used red raspberry tea regularly for her diabetes. And then also, her sister, Ella Bisa, she knew a lot of the medicines. They said that she knew 100 medicines. She had a really good memory to remember all these medicines, to share them. She did a lot of presentations at schools, things like that. People would come and learn about the medicines from her. And we were her next door neighbor growing up. So I remember medicines hanging in her porch area and going with them to go get some once in a while. And also the same thing, just just part of like the everyday life, not really, said much about it, things like that. Then one of the main people that I learned from was Dave Bisa. It worked out really good because when I had my daughter, I was able to stay home with her, so I had a lot of time. And then it just so happened that I was starting to become really interested in the medicines, and I'd start attending some of Dave's presentations, and I just thought, wow, I cannot believe how much he remembers. We need to write this down. So that's kind of how the book came about, and just learning from his good memory of the stories. Also, a lot of my aunts and uncles, I interviewed them, and they remembered a lot. A lot of my cousins. My grandma had 16 kids, so we have a really huge family. So no matter who you talk to, each person has a little bit more information about the medicines, and it kind of all helps it fit. Then we interviewed a lot of the older elders with our tribe too, and got a lot of really interesting information of the medicines that also help fill in all of those blanks. I really am thankful, Anishik Onewe, to our ancestors for teaching us and keeping the medicines going. So today we're going to focus on sumac. The American way of saying sumac is sumac. It's spelled S-U-M-A-C. And I grew up hearing everybody call it sumac. And so you just kind of hear it from a lot of people. A lot of our older people still call it sumac. And we're standing by a sumac tree right here. And this is one of the smaller ones. They grow super fast, so they can just start out from a little tiny tree at the beginning of the summer and be this tall by the end of the summer. So they really grow fast. We're in the park. The park is a really awesome place to come because there's so many different medicines. There's different types of areas to go. There's like fieldy areas, woodsy areas, down by the river. There's all kinds of medicines there. I think in all probably here there might be like 15 to 20 medicines just in the park. So if you want to start learning about them, this would be a great place to come. So we just pulled this branch off the trees. Right in the center of the park there's a grouping of sumac trees, and they're pretty tall, so we just took down this branch. And then we always want to make sure when we do take a medicine that we offer our tobacco. I always just say Inishik Kishalamokwe Onewe. My language skills aren't the best, but they say if you use the language that you do know, that's a really good thing. So that's something that I go by. So I try to do that. So then you just put the tobacco down by the medicines, and it's to be thankful for the medicines, to acknowledge how awesome they are, and then even to think about how you're going to use them in a good way. When you pick them, you want to be in a good frame of mind, so you have good thoughts, so that goes into your medicines. It's a whole process, and you're gathering in the summer and the different gathering times, so then you can have the medicines in the winter when you need them. So our gathering time for sumac is actually after the first frost. what we gather is the little berry stem. So when we gather it after the first frost, and logistically it's a good time to get it then too, is because then all the bugs have done everything that they need to with the plant, and then they're all out by after the first frost. So at that time of the year, we just pick them off. And right now they're snapping off pretty easy, but at that time it's just pretty much just one snap and it'll come off. But they're still a little bit green yet. So this is the part that we gather. You can store them in the bags that oranges come in. It's an orange meshy bag. You can store them in there. A lot of our people, they always like to reuse things that they have, so you can use that. You can put them in baskets. You could even just take the whole branch and hang them upside down, dry them that way. I always let these dry a good 2 months, because by then they kind of feel like they're dry, so it's hard to tell when they're exactly dry. So I just let them dry for about 2 months, and then you can even just put them in a paper bag too. That's one cool thing about the medicines, is you don't need any special materials. The only thing you really need is your tobacco, and that's all you need to gather medicines. And then you can use what you have to dry them and store them. So I always just leave them like this. You could break them up if you want to, but usually I don't have a whole lot of time, so I usually just end up having them like this. And then you can just put them in a basket or in the paper bags, let them dry, and then you can store them in a jar. You could even just store them in that orange bag. Just hang up the orange bag and leave them in there and let them dry. And as you need them, just pick it out as you need them. If you're going to dry them in a jar, you can just put them in a jar. And this would be a pretty small one, but I'm just using this one for an example. And then what I've learned from our people too is how we store them then is, instead of the lid on top of the jar, we put fabric. And we put that on top and we just screw it on. And then you can have it in the winter, all winter long. And part of the reason is to let the air come in and let it dry. And then we still look at these as a living thing, so we're letting them breathe, and it's respect. It's respect for your medicines and storing them so in a good way, so when you need them, they're there. And then when we use this medicine, the recipe for this is 1 tablespoon of the sumac per 1 glass of water. You could boil like 2 cups of water, and then as it's boiling, then you just load your little tea. You can put in the medicine without a tea steeper, or you can use this. It's super simple. Or any other kind of tea steeper. You could use a strainer, put it on top of your pot as you're boiling it, and then just stick this in your pot of water as you're boiling it. Boil it for a good 5 minutes, 5-10 minutes, and let it cool, and it's ready to drink. And what we use this medicine for is for coughs, colds, anything like in the chest. So it's good for asthma, it's good for pneumonia, it's good for the lungs, and it helps with like the coughing. And Ella actually cured herself of pneumonia a couple times in her life using sumac and another one of our medicines, number 6. So it's really good for those kinds of issues. And then another interesting fact about the sumac is I grew up hearing it called Sumac. When we started working on the book, we had Glenn Jacobs come, and he was here for one of our language camps, and so I had him come over and help me go through all the medicines to figure out what the native words would be for the ones that we were working on. So when we got to sumac, I said, yeah, a lot of our people call it shumac, and he said that's because the native word is shamak. And when he told me that, I just like got the chills, and I just thought, wow, that is so cool. That to me, it seems like our people were still saying the word in the language. So a lot of times people will say our language is totally gone, it's dead, but there's still little things like that happening. So I just thought that was just the coolest thing about Sumac. I'm going to show you in the book. We have the picture of the medicine, and then we have the native word Sumac, and that's how you spell it. And I had just put many people from our tribe call this Sumac. So it's really neat to be able to just focus on all those little tiny things about the medicine and how they relate to the language. Another thing that he said about the language was that a lot of the words are very descriptive. So for the one medicine that we have, the burdock root, when you say it, it means plant with big leaves. So it's just really neat how our language works to help describe the medicines too.